now I'd like to hand over to Mhairi Adams and Smillie, who are going to talk to us about the steps to establishing a federation and events as a growth strategy. So that was 2 different items. I'll hand it over to you, ladies.
Okay, thanks very much for that, and I'll kick off. I'm still slightly suffering from the fact that I can't see everybody, so it's difficult when you're not responding to the faces and the feedback that you think you're looking at. However, I will persevere. So here we've got some very suitable tartanry to let you know that we're based in Scotland, and I'm currently chair of Pickleball Scotland. And Anne, were you the longest serving CEO of a sports association in the UK? Is that correct?
Yes, in the UK, that's correct.
Yeah, so Anne has very recently retired as Chief Executive Officer of Badminton Scotland, and in what's quite a political environment, I imagine the world of sports association, it's a remarkable feat, Anne. I think that you've held that position for the amount of time that you did. Also, Anne's a good friend of mine and is a master of persuading people to volunteer for events. So I think if we could bottle that ability, I think it would be a remarkable thing. Anyway, I'm going to talk again a wee bit about the idea of setting up an association and getting a level of recognition at national level, and I think hopefully maybe reinforce some of Mark's points. But Mark, interestingly, you've been going for 8 years and pursuing this objective. We're really not yet even 2 years old. So I think I'm going to be coming at it from a much earlier stage in terms of our evolution. And then Anne, who, when she started with Badminton Scotland, very much decided that her strategy going forward in terms of growth would be to use an events type of strategy. So Anne will come on to that in terms of growth. If I could have the next screen, please, that would be great. So to some extent, we go back to Frank's discussion about a group of people getting together and saying, we really need to be able to move things on in the country to get the structures together to be recognised as the national governing body. And we realised quite early on we would need to be fairly passionate about the sport and passionate to grow the game, because it is quite a slow process. It takes a lot of your time, and it can be a bit frustrating at times that you can't quite achieve all the things when you want to. And it's back to the ideas of our small associations, growing associations, being quite resource constrained, and I think that serves to slow certain things down. But we wanted to get organised on a national basis and pursue a Scottish agenda. Interestingly, in the UK, and Karen, you can probably comment on this, we found that there were organisations calling themselves UK Pickleball and GB Pickleball, all things that you would recognise, but they're not actually recognised in our country. Most of sport is devolved to the member countries. Thus, we really needed to go down a line of Pickleball Scotland, and very helpfully, Karen and I were able to talk quite early on. And Karen, you were happy to go down the route of Pickleball England, and that allowed us to be pursuing the agendas that will actually get us recognised in our own countries. Karen, would you agree with that?
I would, I absolutely would. I think actually there's another element to this that's got learning to it for everyone else, and that is that the previous 2 organisations didn't have the trust of players. So when Frank was talking about governance and transparency, those other 2 organisations, and I'm not disparaging them in any way, they didn't have the trust of players because some of their activities they were earning money from, and so they felt like it was for profit rather than not for profit. And you know, that's why Frank and I started Pickleball England, because we wanted it to be a not-for-profit organisation, something that was done altruistically to grow the game and to be for the members. Sorry, Mhairi.
No, no, it's great to. It's just great to hear it from another point of view, and a neighbouring country in the UK. So in part, what we were also trying to do was build credibility with local government at government level in terms of sport, because without moving forward in this way, we really are never going to be able to tap into serious funds that we hope will be out there in the future once we get our critical mass developed sufficiently. We did meet with Sport Scotland quite early on, and we know that our target is something in the region of 450 to 500 members. And those are individuals rather than clubs, Mark, actually, which seems to be more the way that it's moving in Spain. These are to be individual members of Pickleball Scotland. And once we get to that stage, we can go back and start the conversation with Sport Scotland. Of course, we've put together our constitution, we've got transparent accounts and all the stuff that we've heard about from Frank at the beginning. So we're putting all these structures in place as well. We wanted to create a supportive membership as well, because really I think we wanted to try and bring together all the groups that were currently playing pickleball in Scotland. And I think with the theory of, you know, you'll get more out of that if you can bring people together, working together. And again, we wanted to attract volunteer support and talent. And you're clearly very much part of that talent. And I think you would recognise many of the people that are around Pickleball Scotland as volunteers that have worked with you in the past. Would you agree?
Yes, most definitely. Yes, yes.
I know Anne is one of the most persuasive people, as I say, I've ever met that in terms of garnering volunteer support. So it's a remarkable thing. So we decided, and to be honest with you, this is a group of us around a kitchen table type of group, decided let's try and take this forward in a meaningful way. If I could have the next slide, Karen. What we recognised was, well, we could call a meeting, but if we didn't go forward to that meeting with some things in place, we might just have run the risk of ending up just talking again, all going away from that meeting and saying, this is a really good idea, but nothing actually really moving forward around it. So we prepared a few documents. We sat down and we wrote a strategic vision document. Now, to some extent, it was naive. To some extent, we haven't necessarily followed all of that vision. And frankly, recently, during our COVID times, we did actually sit down and rewrite now the document. Knowing what we know a year and a half later, we realised we needed to revisit some of what we were trying to do. Well, again, one of Anne's talented people that she brought in and around badminton developed an interest in pickleball and has been able to, she put together the website that we have, and really without that, it's, you know, we would have probably looked a bit amateurish. We have other people that have professionalised our logo, for example, and just made that look a lot better. So we're trying to build up things that people that we invited to the meeting to establish Pickleball Scotland would feel maybe that they could get behind and that they had more information. We put together social media, and currently we're on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. We think that TikTok might be a step too far, to be honest. But one of the ongoing things we're trying to do is build up the number of followers and likes that we have. So, for example, in Twitter, in about a year and a half, we've now got 590 followers. And one of the tactics that we found helped with that was to strategically follow other people. And if you do that, you tend to get a reasonable number of follows back. So that's one of the ways that we've been able to grow our numbers in terms of social media impact. We've got on Facebook, we have nearly 700 people following us on Facebook. Instagram's been a wee bit less significant for us, partly I think because, again, the age profile that we currently have participating in the sport in Scotland, it is an older profile, but we do, for example, have a schools teaching resource. So, and we've been into schools with those materials, and very quickly we think the age will begin to fall, and that's the important way forward. So we got all the social media established, and we were able to show people at the meeting when we were trying to launch Pickleball Scotland that we were organised. We'd prepared a constitution and articles of association. We've got a very good management accountant, again, Anne, a friend and a good friend to Badminton Scotland historically. So very experienced people in terms of sports associations. So we called the first ever AGM and launched all of these materials. And at the time, we had established a bank account, and to establish the bank account, I became chair, Steph Robertson was treasurer, and Sharon McKechnie was secretary. We had the bank account in place, but at the first ever AGM, what we did just to ensure the transparency and the fairness of our establishment, we resigned once we'd introduced all the material to people, we resigned at the AGM, and then we put ourselves forward for election and asked if there was anyone else that was interested in being elected to those positions. As it turned out, there wasn't. And so, in fact, we certainly found that we were very legitimately then elected into the positions that we then went on to hold. So that was quite an important stage. Pardon?
That was a really great strategy.
Again, I think it was just experience on the part of the people around me as well, and just trying to make everything transparent and fair. And I think we just felt very good about the fact that we were then legitimately elected.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Karen. If we could maybe move on from there. So, as a form of sort of summation to get what is really a micro governing body established, we're 2 years old. Mark's 8 years old and still being patient, and I'm realising, you know, we're going to have to be doing the same sorts of things. But I think if you can develop a strategy, develop a brand identity, and I must admit ours has improved and evolved since we had that first AGM, establish a team. And again, I think I'm fortunate, or Pickleball is fortunate, that there is a group that has been tutored, finely honed, call it what you like, in part by Anne and their experiences at Badminton Scotland. We also are lucky that we have professors of physical activity, we have professors of coaching framework experience that are playing the game and interested. So there's a degree of good fortune that's gone on around Pickleball Scotland in terms of the people that are currently playing and interested and wanting to help. We've done our best to develop local, national, international links, going to events, the WPF, for example, those sorts of things. Again, they all serve to the future of being recognised formally by Sport Scotland. We have run our first event, and it really did excite people in Scotland. It went extremely well. It wasn't really about raising funds, but you raise a small surplus, and it did for us. And again, people that have run World Badminton Championships, some of you were actually at our event, Karen, you were there, and you know, Anne brought together all of the hotel and dinner type of arrangements. So huge amounts of experience that we had to help us get the event launched. And importantly, we're constantly driving membership, because that's the thing that will ultimately allow us to go to Sport Scotland. So a lot of what we're doing in terms of our social media, etc., when we have any sorts of events, is about encouraging people to become members of Pickleball Scotland. This is the the sort of critical area that we're interested in. We're also developing coaching and teaching materials. We, as I say, we have a schools resource already. We have the first 2 levels of a coaching framework thrashed out in terms of, again, one of the professors at Edinburgh University. And I think to underline something that Frank was very, very concerned about, and I know, Karen, you're the same. I know, Riff, this is important to you in terms of the people around pickleball, was absolutely that it was to be, you know, it's not for personal profit, and, you know, it's all about transparency, properly audited written accounts, audited accounts, etc., etc. So for us, those have been the ingredients to getting a national association, trying to get a national association established. And we're a micro organisation, but we certainly have the ambitions to take pickleball forward and get it recognised by the Scottish governments and Sport Scotland. So that's my piece. And I've spoken about Anna. We have as well from Scotland Anne Smillie, as I've said, recently retired Chief Executive Officer of Badminton Scotland, and Anne developed an approach that used staging major events as part of the growth strategy for the organisation that she was CEO of. And Anne, possibly at the end, it would be interesting to hear your comments on pickleball wanting to partner up with a sport such as badminton. But that said, I'll hand you over to Anne Smillie now, and she'll talk about events.
Thank you very much indeed, Mhairi. Well, like Mhairi, I'm only looking at the slides, so I hope you can see me. As has been mentioned, my background in sport comes from within the governing body structure of administration and organisation. Yes, I am the former Chief Executive of Badminton Scotland, and during my 30 years with the governing body, I had the ultimate responsibility for the staging of 6 major events, including 2 European and 4 World Championships. Badminton Scotland had a world-class reputation for staging events. Our athletes produced World, European and Commonwealth Games medalists. We had a fantastic army of experienced volunteers, and we were a highly respected governing body and were financially secure. But it wasn't always like that. When I joined Badminton Scotland, it was a relatively small, insignificant governing body with very little profile, certainly no strategic direction, no sponsors, very few elite athletes, and certainly no world-class athletes. And the only funding we actually had was a small government grant. We decided that we should start again with a blank canvas and really review our strategic direction. The first thing that we did was to consult with our members and produce a long-term strategic plan. Our plan contains sections relating to developing the sport, increasing the numbers of players wishing to participate in the sport, growing and nurturing the volunteer corps, raising the level of our top athletes, and exposing what the sport had to offer to a wider audience, and especially to the media and to potential private sector sponsors. It was also important to us to ensure that a major event strategy was to sit alongside our strategic plan. And our strategy for events included that we were going to hold annual international tournaments, and when we felt that we were in a position with the necessary experience within our volunteer corps and within the organisation itself, we were going to bid for a European and then ultimately a World Championship. And certainly in our wildest dreams at that time, we never thought we would have staged so many big events. Now, I attribute Badminton Scotland's success in many ways to the fact that we did have this ambitious event strategy. The right event properly delivered can provide a massive stimulus across all the areas that I've covered in the development plan, and inject a huge boost to your progress against your plan. Major events offer you an opportunity to showcase your sport within your country and thereby raising its profile and without doubt aiding the development of the sport. Events give you the opportunity to recruit, train and hopefully retain much valued organisers, officials and volunteers. In fact, it's worth mentioning that the last event I was involved with, the 2017 World Badminton Championships, we had a small army of 450 volunteers helping us to stage that event. Another priority for Badminton Scotland was to ensure that we had a coaching and development legacy. It was so important for us to ensure that was in place. Securing a development legacy, for example, can be done in so many different ways. Badminton Scotland ran a series of carnivals in tandem with its major events. These provided an opportunity for thousands of children over the years to gain a fun and exciting introduction to the sport and to see the sport played at the highest level, and also to be given the opportunity to meet the top stars. The groundwork for this began long in advance of the actual event, with mini leagues, primary school competitions, come and try sessions. These were all used to build up the event. And I think it's also worth mentioning that many of our world-class athletes actually were introduced to the sport at these carnivals that were run alongside the tournament. They would come along and they would see the players in action, and they were so inspired that by watching the top athletes, they decided that to take up the sport and went on to sporting greatness. Another important legacy for us was the coaching legacy. At events, many of the world's top coaches would be present at your event, and that would give us the opportunity to increase the knowledge and experience of our homegrown coaches. Seminars and workshops were also organised, and it was also easier to attract the top sports scientists and experts in other relevant fields to speak at the seminars that we put in place. There's no doubt, though, that staging a major event is certainly a lot of hard work, and needs to be a lot of thought needs to be gone into an event before you decide to bid for one. However, I've got to say that the rewards far outweigh the pressures and demands. Staging an event, yes, it is extremely. It's without doubt extremely satisfying. You have a sense of elation that will live with you for weeks and months after the event. And the reasons you would feel like that is that you have presented your sport to your nation or to the world in the best possible light. You will have enabled your players to benefit from the inspiration of performing on the world stage in front of their home crowd. You will have provided a degree of financial flexibility for your organisation as a result of bringing in funding from both your government and from commercial sponsors. You will have given your audience a thrilling experience and left them with the feeling that they want to see more. And also, and very importantly, you will have inspired a new generation of young players to engage in the sport and possibly found your next star. And of course, it is also important that you have really added to the quality and knowledge of your homegrown coach base. And as you sit back, tired but content, and you reflect on all the things you and your team have achieved, you will gradually realise that it won't be too long before you're really ready to start the whole process again. So thank you for the opportunity to presenting to you today.
Thank you very much, Anne. I think you covered that slide. Maybe the next one, actually, Karen, if you could, is so. Oh no, that's it. Yeah, that's a shot from which event was that, Anne?
That was the 2017 World Championships.
Oh, interesting. Anne actually managed to get me. Was that the one that you got me to? Was I running the catering at that one, or no? The hospitality.
No, I'm sorry. That slide is from the 2007 World Championships.
Oh, is it? Right.
Yes.
I think I was.
Yes, and it was prior to Scotland's bid to stage the Commonwealth Games.
Okay, so but lovely to see the sort of audience participation. And Anne, I think you're credited with bringing these sort of plastic things that everybody smashed together to get a good atmosphere going. And
yes,
then
the sticks.
Yeah, and then the next slide, Karen. That, and you can talk about it, that's kids at your carnival, isn't it?
Yes, as I mentioned, it was important that we organised these carnivals, as we called them. They would sit alongside all of our events, because that was very important to inspire the next generation of players. And what would happen is we were fortunate enough in all our venues to have plenty of halls, and there would be a specific hall for the children to come and play for anything up till 2 hours. And then once they'd finished playing, many had been introduced to the sport for the very first time. They would go through to the playing competition arena and see the stars in action. And that was very important to us. And actually what we did funding-wise, alongside our funding proposal that would be presented to the government and to commercial sponsors, there would be an ambitious development programme contained in our submission, which would let the funders know that there was going to be a development legacy to which they could market, and that was important.
Yeah, great. And just a thank you very much from Pickleball Scotland for the invitation to come and just be able to chat a bit about some of the things that we're doing. I hope it's of some use to people somewhere out there. And thank you, Karen, again for all the work that you do, drawing a lot of this together. One last thing, Anne. What would you say to Mark about partnering up with badminton? If you were advising me, what would you say?
Well, if you have any aspirations towards Olympic dreams, I would avoid trying to partner another sport. One must remember that every sport is your competitor, and every sport's loyalty is to its own sport. Mm-hmm. And not to be fooled in any way that by partnering a sport would result in anything other than pain for pickleball, I think. And any aspirations that the World Federation would have in the world stage, i.e. getting involved in the Olympics, could seriously come back and haunt you as a result of being a tagged on sport, whether it be with badminton or to tennis. And I'm not surprised that badminton was not particularly interested in partnering pickleball, because his priority, and Spain's an excellent example, that in the last 15 years it's gone from a relatively insignificant sport, if I can be so bold, to now one of the world-class sporting governing bodies they have in the world of badminton. And Karina, of course, can take a lot of credit because of her outstanding success winning medals at the Olympics. She has done so much to market the sport, and it just shows you that if you can attract talented athletes to play your sport, and then they grow and perform on the world stage, it can really do great things for pickleball.
Great, thank you, Anne. I just was interested what a badminton person with your experience would say, and it's what I thought you might think, or no, actually.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Never.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies. Has anyone got a burning question
I was
for
going to say, Karen.
or Anne? Yes.
Karen, if that's okay, if I can come in. Thank you very much, ladies. Very, very insightful for the presentation there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really, for me, from a presentation and an event point of view, two questions really. One, who is your sort of main target audience from a participation point of view, be it seniors, school, universities, or other groups or organisations? And really, the second question is from an organisation, as you well know, or you may know, England Pickleball, 2 directors, 6 regional directors, and then county kind of representatives coming up. Many people trying to help because there's so much work to be done. How is Pickleball Scotland formed?
And I'll just start off with this, and maybe you can pitch in if you feel I miss anything out or anything along those lines. When we rewrote the strategy document recently, actually, we sort of tried to outline more clearly who we think our target market is. And we do have an extremely good schools resource that was developed as a 12-lesson plan for use in late primary school children, potentially early secondary. And we found that the Scottish PE Teachers Association members have really bought into this extremely well. So it's become, and in fact, there's a backlog of demand of going out to schools and introducing the pack. And then the teachers, they're professional. It's written as a teacher's resource. They then go off and they use that then in their schools and their classrooms. So we feel there's a very clear opportunity emerging that and it was clear we knew we had to get it into schools because that's the future. People like me are not the future, and unfortunately, but we also recognise that we're pushing at an open door to some extent with older participants because it allows people to continue a racket life. Mm-hmm. And that takes a number of government initiatives going forward as well. You're right, we're really thin on the ground, to be honest with you, and we're absolutely always looking for ways to try and take the sport, introduce it into a scenario where they then will continue to introduce it to other participants, schools, leisure centres. We're trying to move into there and get pickleball champions, if you will, and we're getting some success. There's absolutely no doubt about that. I'm trying very hard at the moment. I mean, I'm pushing myself to get more advisors for me, and clearly is a really important one. That we're lucky as well that the recently retired chief executive of Netball Scotland is minded to be helpful for advice. So I'm learning more about trying to use these people more. But I'm encouraging our committee, which is a committee of 7, the officers, the chair, the treasurer, and the secretary, and then 4 others was the route that we took. Events, for example, being one of the other areas, and got a very talented leader of that area. And I'm encouraging people to try and build teams around themselves to just help us maybe to make more progress more rapidly, and not to just keep the focus on to the individuals that happen to be sitting in the roles, if you will. So I don't know if that answers, Dave, does that answer your question? And Anne, I don't know if there's anything.
Yeah, for sure, for me. And just quickly follow on question, how do you often meet with Karen and discuss and share things at all, or how does that work?
We do chat on the phone, Karen and I, quite a lot. Karen's probably one of what I would consider to be my, I'm not quite sure about this, what do I think, or what does she think about something that I'm observing that's happening in a different part of the world. So I will quite often chat certain things through Karen, absolutely. Yeah, so it's really important in the UK that Scotland, England, Ireland and Wales are working together well. That's,
for sure.
It's the best way forward.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
All right. So thank you again, ladies. If other questions come up, please feel free to reach out to, if I meant to put the email address on for Pickleball Scotland. Do you want to say what it is, Mhairi?
Well, you can, if you can still see that last, no, you can't necessarily, but it's info@pickleballscotland.org. But if you look for our website as well, if anyone's interested in joining, because that's what we, yeah, so it's info@pickleballscotland.org is our email address, and we'd love to hear from anyone.